when the millionaire girl, proud of her black belt and wealth, insulted the maid and challenged her to a fight. No one expected what the humble maid would reveal. What happened next left the entire mansion in stunned silence. The evening glittered with lights as music filled the grand hall of the mansion, where the millionaire girl celebrated her birthday with elegance and pride. She wore a shimmering silver gown that hugged her frame, and around her waist, tied like a badge of honor, was her black martial arts belt. Guests whispered about her wealth and skills, admiring her beauty while she soaked in their attention. Yet beneath her smile was arrogance, a pride that often looked down on those she thought beneath her. Her gaze soon landed on the black maid, who moved silently among the guests, serving drinks with her usual grace. A mischievous smirk spread across the girl's face as she decided to make her superiority known. Raising her voice so everyone could hear, she called out, "Yes, you with the tray. You clean my floors, but can you face me?" The crowd grew quiet, unsure if she was serious. With a confident flick of her hair, the girl stepped into the center of the hall and tightened her black belt. "I'm a champion fighter," she boasted, "and I bet you wouldn't last a second against me." The maid paused, her hand steady as she placed the tray down, and for a moment the room froze in anticipation. Many expected her to refuse, to shrink away in embarrassment, but instead she turned slowly toward the young millionaire, her eyes calm yet piercing. She said nothing, but her silence carried a weight that unsettled the crowd. Murmurs filled the room, some giggling at the absurdity, others gasping at the boldness of the challenge. The tension was thick, every guest waiting to see what would happen next. Little did they know, this moment would change everything. The hall buzzed with uneasy energy as the maid gently set her tray aside and straightened her back, her quiet presence suddenly commanding the room in a way no one had expected. The millionaire girl folded her arms, smirking as if victory was already hers, while her friends laughed loudly, encouraging her to show the maid her place. Their laughter echoed across the marble floors, but the maid neither flinched nor spoke. She simply stepped forward, her apron still tied neatly around her waist, her posture composed and graceful. The girl cracked her knuckles dramatically, raising her chin with pride, while the guests whispered and giggled at the thought of such an unequal match. Yet as the maid stood in the center of the hall, her eyes steady and unwavering, the air began to shift. Something about her calmness silenced a few chuckles, replacing them with curious stares. One guest whispered, "Why does she look so confident?" while another frowned, sensing there was more to the maid than her plain uniform suggested. The millionaire girl mistook the silence as fear and laughed louder, circling her opponent like a predator showing off. "Don't be scared," she taunted. "I'll make this quick." But still, the maid remained composed, her breathing even, her expression unreadable. It was as though she was waiting, not for a chance to strike, but for the right moment to reveal something hidden. The crowd leaned in closer, their amusement turning into anticipation, their eyes darting between the arrogant girl and the mysterious maid who hadn't spoken a single word. For the first time that evening, the millionaire girl felt a flicker of unease, though she quickly buried it under her pride. The night that began with laughter was about to take a turn no one could have predicted. The tension in the mansion hall thickened until it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. The millionaire girl tightened her black belt, her eyes flashing with arrogance as she lunged forward, throwing a sharp punch meant to end the so-called fight before it could even begin. Gasps erupted from the guests, but in a single smooth motion, the maid stepped aside, her body moving with a precision that stunned everyone. The punch sliced through empty air, and the girl stumbled slightly, shocked that her opponent had evaded so easily. Whispers rippled through the crowd, guests exchanging wide-eyed glances as the maid adjusted her stance calmly, her expression still serene. The girl, embarrassed, growled and launched a series of kicks, each strike faster than the last, showcasing her years of training. Yet, to the disbelief of everyone watching, the maid flowed around each attack like water, her movements quiet, controlled, and effortless. She never raised her hands in aggression, never struck back, only dodged with grace that seemed almost impossible for someone who had been dismissed as a mere servant. The millionaire girl's breathing grew heavier, her face flushed with frustration as her pride crumbled with every failed attempt. "Stand still," she shouted angrily, but the maid only tilted her head slightly, her calm eyes reflecting a strength far greater than brute force. The guests, who once laughed at the idea of a maid standing against a black belt millionaire, now watched in stunned silence, realizing that the true imbalance of power was not in wealth or titles, but in discipline and inner strength. With each missed strike, the girl's confidence began to falter, while the maid's quiet dignity only grew brighter, hinting that the real lesson of the night was only just beginning. The hall had grown eerily quiet, the music long forgotten as all eyes followed the strange duel unfolding before them. The millionaire girl's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, her hair clinging to her damp forehead, while the maid stood in perfect stillness, as though untouched by the chaos around her. The silence pressed in until finally, the maid's voice broke through, soft yet steady, carrying across the entire room like a bell. "I did not step forward tonight to fight you," she said, her gaze locked firmly on the girl, "but to remind you that strength is not always shown in violence." The words stunned the guests, but the girl only frowned, her pride refusing to let go. "What do you know of strength?" she spat, but her voice trembled ever so slightly. The maid took a breath and continued, her tone calm but weighted with truth. "Before I wore this apron, I wore a different uniform. I was a martial arts instructor. I trained fighters who went on to win championships. I taught discipline, honor, and respect, values far greater than any title or belt." Gasps spread through the hall like fire, disbelief mixing with awe as the realization sank in. The arrogant girl froze, her fists lowering slowly as her eyes widened in shock. The maid's revelation shattered the illusion of superiority that had hung over the room. For the first time, the millionaire girl saw not a servant standing before her, but a master whose humility was greater than her own pride. Around them, the crowd whispered with reverence, their earlier laughter replaced by silence filled with admiration. And in that charged moment, the millionaire girl felt her arrogance falter, a seed of respect quietly taking root within her heart. For a long moment, the grand hall remained frozen, the weight of the maid's revelation hanging heavy in the air. The millionaire girl's proud expression wavered, her hands trembling as she lowered them completely, realizing that all her flashy moves and loud boasts meant nothing compared to the quiet, controlled strength of the woman she had mocked. Shame flushed her face as she glanced at the guests, many of whom now looked at the maid with newfound admiration. The girl swallowed hard, her voice breaking the silence at last. I was wrong," she whispered, then, with trembling humility, she bowed deeply before the maid, an act that left the audience stunned. The maid's calm eyes softened, and instead of gloating, she stepped forward and gently lifted the girl's chin. "Strength without respect is weakness," she said kindly. "It is not your fists or your wealth that define you, but your heart." The girl blinked back tears, her arrogance finally stripped away, and nodded slowly, as though for the first time she truly understood. The crowd erupted into applause, not for the girl's defeat, but for the maid's dignity and wisdom. Whispers of admiration spread quickly. How a woman who served quietly every day had proven herself greater than the arrogance of wealth and titles. From that night on, the story of the maid who humbled a millionaire was told again and again, a reminder that true greatness lies not in power or riches, but in humility, discipline, and respect. The millionaire girl never forgot the lesson, and those who had witnessed it carried the memory as a living example that appearances deceive, but character always reveals the truth. And so, the night that began with laughter and arrogance ended with silence, respect, and the birth of a lesson that would never be forgotten.